Okay.
Start with Husky Deli again. Who were the owner? You talked about Herman.
Yeah, Herman.
Start with Herman.
Herman was the German that started Husky's Delicatessen, and it started out on California Avenue, about where, well, right next to what is the Northwest Art and Frame. They had if you go, you can tell where it was by going in the alley. You can see the door that was there. Next to them was a post office. To the south of that was a post office, and to the south of that was a Safeway store. But anyway, Husky's Delicatessen was in that spot. Herman Miller started the business, and John, his oldest son, and Alice, their daughter, were there. And Hugh Miller was he was not connected with the store, but he did repair work and that sort of thing. He'd come in and help fix things and clean up and everything. And then Bob was the youngest one. He graduated in 1949 or 1950 from West Seattle High School. And when I finally did get my license or my health permit, I would go in, like I'd go in on Thanksgiving Day, and it was they were swamped. And I would go in, and they used to put the eggs in a front window. They would pile big piles of eggs in a front window and come in, and people would say, I need a dozen eggs, and they'd want medium or whatever, the extra large or whatever. And they'd get up and they'd have the little fold-out boxes, and they would put them in the box. And then I had to make sure that bin was always full of eggs. And when it came to the ice cream thing, I always made sure that the machine was clean, and that the big metal container, now they come in cardboard, they put them in cardboard, but they were put in big metal cans about 3 feet tall and about 12 inches in diameter, and they would put them in these metal cans. I made sure that those were all clean, and then I mixed up the mix to make the ice cream, and you know, that sort of thing. And that was one of the staples in West Seattle. And there was another ice cream store that was on Alaska Street. I would say, well, between California and the alleyway, it was called Arctic Circle, and they couldn't compete with the Huskies. I mean, ice cream is ice cream, but something that maybe the thing that they put in that I didn't care for in the Huskies ice cream, that's what made it a success, because they were successful. And they later on, there was they were getting ready to move, and the family, their corporation is a family corporation, and everybody in the family gets a vote. Well, they wanted the boys, Jack and
you shouldn't go there.
yeah. Okay. Anyway, they wanted to open up a business across the street, and it didn't work out with the rest of the corporation. So they bought where Roscoe's Dime Store was. That's where they are today. They bought that in there, and they had a relative in Montana that that made the chandeliers that are hanging in that store. And Jack now runs it. One of the boys was killed in a boating accident, and then the other one went into the priesthood. He's a Catholic priest. The family was Catholic, and they would always ask me, "Did you go to church today?" And I said, "No, you better go home and go to church." But they're still. Alice finally had to leave the store. She took care of her mother. Her mother was quite ill. They lived up on just off Admiral Hill, looking over the city. They couldn't quite see the city from where they were, but Alice was up there, and she just recently passed away. And that's all. Jack is the only one that's John's wife is still alive, and their family is still living. But Jack is the oldest male, and he's still running the store.
What are some of the other landmark businesses in the Junction that come to mind, ones that were there for quite a long time and served generations of folks?
There was a big corporation there. It was called G.O. Guy's Drugstore, and it was right where the A&P, where they toured the hole in the ground. It was at that crosswalk. If you walked west, you'd walk right into the front door, and I believe that's where the Mexican restaurant is there now. there were, like I say, Ernst Hardware. My brother-in-law worked for Ernst Hardware when it was up next to J.C. Penney's on, in the 4000 block of California Avenue, and
Seattle Sporting Goods was there.
West Seattle Sporting Goods was in a spot there where I guess it's a wood furniture store now, but that was West Seattle Sporting Goods, and I hung out in the back of there because the guy repaired bicycles, and I had a real neat bike, and I would go in and the guy I would unwrap boxes and of bikes and stuff, and then that became Big Five. I forget the name of the family, but anyway, they moved out. The Big Five is now out in Burien.
Westwood.
Hmm?
Westwood.
Well,
Westwood Village?
Yeah.
Westwood Village? I don't
Yeah.
think so. Well,
Yeah.
anyway,
Yeah.
they're
Yeah.
doesn't matter. They moved out, and that it was a a good operation going.
There's so many businesses to remember. One thing that I'm thinking of when you were talking about Hi-U is Ted Best, obviously big into Hi-U, but and then that makes me think of the city council, which makes me think of Bob Jones. And Bob Jones had a menswear.
Yeah, he had a menswear store.
Talk about Bob Jones.
Bob Jones had a menswear store. Let's see, it was on the California and Alaska. On the northwest corner was People's Drug Store, and then there was a little shop. I'm not sure what it was. It was right next to it, but Bob Jones was right next to that store. It was a men's store, and it was a really neat place. Every time I go by, we'd wave to one another, and he tried to talk me into buying a real fancy hat to wear, and he tried to talk me, and I never did. But it was, he was another. He served his customers very well, just like Van's brothers did across the street. Irv and Roger Van ran the restaurant. The restaurant is now an Indian restaurant, but they were West Seattle. Bob Jones, the guy that was the People's Drug Store guy was a perfect West Seattle guy. Across the street from that was a Gallon Camp shoe store, which ended up being LaGrace, and she was the, I guess you would say, she was the Madam President of West Seattle. She was very active in every association, and she did a lot for Helen Sutton did a whole lot for West Seattle in her operating her business, and it was that, and there was Margaret's Apparel just up the street, and J.C. Penney's. One of the things about J.C. Penney's, they had clerks that you would go to, but the clerks didn't have any money. What they would do, they had this little thing that they would reach up and they would unscrew this cup, and they put the bill and the money in it, and they pull this thing, and the thing would shoot across the ceiling up into the upper level of the J.C. Penney store, and that's where all the money was. I mean, the customers couldn't get up there, and that's where all the money was, and they would make change, and and it was really, really interesting to see that. And then when Ernst wanted to move, Ernst moved into where the Tradewell store was on California and Alaska, and which was now a bank. They moved in down there. Well, the J.C. Penney's at the time took that part of the building, and it's now Windermere and some of the other real estates in that area. But one was lower than the other, so you had to walk up three steps to get from J.C. Penney's, or walk down 3 steps to get into where Ernst Hardware used to be, and it was still J.C. Penney's, and that's when it was really large. I mean, you could buy anything at J.C. Penney's there.
One thing we haven't talked about that you may have some specific memories of is the second floor of what is now the Hole, and that is West Seattle Hospital. Talk about
golly.
West Seattle Hospital.
Yeah, I got a little scar on my finger right here that doesn't say West Seattle Hospital on it, but it says West Seattle Hospital to me. I cut myself when I was working at the A&B grocery store. I walked down the alley with the gray apron from A&P wrapped up. By the time I got down there, it had to be thrown out, of course. But they were at the second floor of the hospital. They had a rear entrance for emergency exit, or for emergencies. It was not an emergency type hospital. It was just a general hospital. They could do small emergencies like, you know, cut your finger or anything like that. The entrance, the front entrance, was where the maybe it's Verizon is. There's where Verizon was. I don't know if they're still there now or not. That was the entryway, the front entryway to it. But that whole upstairs in that building where the hole is now was West Seattle Hospital. It started out before my time. It was in a house on 42nd Street above what was called Gene Fiedler's Chevrolet. And the people that moved into that were the McSherry's family, and they were Catholic, and they had 3 girls, and those girls had the most beautiful voices, and they were singers, and they would sing at the Mass, or they would sing for special occasions. Those gals were gorgeous, and they were just beautiful. Then McSherry owned that house until they sold it, and it eventually that's where there's a clinic of some sort up in there now. My daughter goes to a foot specialist up there, but that was where the hospital started out, and it later on moved out to Holden Street, and something happened with the finances, the business, and they just dissolved it, and it was, you know, it was too small to be an emergency hospital, and it was too big to be privately owned, and they just did away with it. It's some kind of a center for health center or something like that now.
But that era when the hospital was in the Junction, to me, is a real illustration of how you could get anything in the Junction, and including your health care. And I have heard many people say that either they or their relatives were born there.
Exactly.
It really helped make it a center of the community.
Yeah, they had a obstetric place there. What you were just talking about is when I grew up, I had a view of St. John's, not St. John's, the Catholic home up on California, Mount St. Vincent. And I always say, you know, someday I'm going to go to that school. And I'm not sure that someday I may be going to that school. If my arthritis doesn't get any better, I may be going to that school up there. But it was, you know, here again, that was a senior function. It was a hospital. It had everything in there. The Mount St. They call it the Mount now, and it's still there, still operating, still functioning. It's part of West Seattle.
Let's talk for a moment about transportation and how that is a factor in working in West Seattle. Not just living, but working. And of course, you go way back to the 2 bascule bridges before the high-level bridge. What was life like as a business person before the high-level bridge and then after?
Well, they would ask after that fellow ran into the bridge, where were you when the ship hit the fan? And ship hit the span, and Jeanette Williams at the time was very active, and she didn't like I don't think she lived in West Seattle.
Yeah, she did.
No, she was in
That's right.
Sandpoint.
Yeah, she lived in Sandpoint. Yeah. That's another story. But she didn't want to have that. She didn't want to have the bridge repaired. She was totally against it, and they were already thinking about a large overhead span, and that's why today that's called the Jeanette Williams Bridge. Which, coming back to High-U again, at the time we had a big city celebration, and we had a Lincoln Continental Town Car with an open roof, and we were chaperones for the Miss High-U. And we pulled our car right up there, And when it came time to leave, the police car says, "What?" Ours was the first car that drove completely across that bridge from one end to the other at that ceremony. And we had our High U girls waving at everybody that was there. But anyway, as far as the span is concerned, it's not big enough already. It's too small. People, I go down there and people will be coming off Avalon Way and they'll go down and try and get over the lower bridge, and it's backed up clear up to the top of Spokane Street where you make the curve. I mean, we're an island. We have a river at the south end that cuts us off, and they've just built a new bridge down there. And we have Alkali Point. We're an island, and that's one of the things that you have to build. We have a taxi. We have a water taxi, and I think maybe if they would put on another taxi or more taxis, there would be more people commuting to go to work downtown. I think it's just because there are transit hubs downtown that they can get anywhere in downtown Seattle without driving on that bridge. The only problem is that they'd have to build large parking garages down on Harbor Avenue, which might not be a good thing because of all the people that have beautiful views down there. But that'd be the only problem with having that bridge. But they do have transits that go right. They have the water taxi transit that comes from three places in the junction in West Seattle area and goes down there. So maybe that's the answer to the problem. But you know, you can plan, but your plans are never at the time. They're gonna, oh, you don't need that. But by the time it's done, they said, why didn't you make it this big instead of making it, 4 lanes? Why didn't you make it 8 lanes both ways?
That's where they get the phrase obsolete before it's complete.
Yeah, obsolete before it's complete. I've never heard that, but yeah, that's West Seattle.
Talk about, I mean, I've heard other people talk about how much of a challenge it was before the high bridge to get in and out of West Seattle because you never knew when the bridge would be up.
Exactly.
Did you face that? Were there times when you had to get somewhere and boom, you were stuck?
No,
We'd always plan to go an
we
hour
always
early.
plan ahead. If we had to be at a wedding and the wedding was at 4 o'clock, we'd leave the studio at noon or 3 o'clock, about 2 o'clock at the latest, because of the bridge and the traffic on the bridge. Because the boats that were going up and down that channel had priority over everything, because if it's high tide, some of those boats couldn't get up the river or down the river unless it was the tide was high, or there'd be somebody that would drive have an accident. Well, even today, people have an accident at I-5 exit, and it's backed up clear to the top of the West Seattle, and that's going across the bridge and then onto the Spokane Street expanded Spokane Street viaduct, and it's not big enough, and they just built it. It's 6 lanes across, 3 lanes each direction, or 4 lanes if you want to count going down First Avenue. It's 4 lanes across. They've got the speed limit at 35, and everybody drives 45 because that's what it used to be, and it's wider now, so that means it's safer. I mean, it's just, what's the difference between? But anyway, if somebody there's an accident or pile up, something happens on that, then traffic is backed up, and I don't know how you can, I've never, I won't say never. When I was in the Army Reserve, I had to be at Fort Lawton on my Saturday for drills, and I had to be there by 8 o'clock. Well, if I waited and I didn't get through the junction, get to the Spokane Street before 7, I was always late for work. So I leave, so I don't know what happened at 7 o'clock. There's some magic thing that all the cars drop out of the sky, and they're on the First Avenue, on that Spokane Street bridge today even, that, it stops. But before 7, you could drive 20 minutes to get to Ballard. The other times it was 45 minutes to an hour to get to Ballard. And that's just a thing. And when I worked for my father, he had a shop down in Sarth Park, and what we just said was, we don't want to drive into traffic, so we're going to operate our business from 10 to 6. So we didn't have, we could drive after the traffic was done. And I've never had to really drive in traffic. It's, you know, I can't relate to it because I didn't experience. I know people that drive all the way from Tacoma to go to work in Seattle at business time, and then they're in traffic going both ways. When I have to go down to Madigan or Fort Lewis or whatever, I always make sure it's after 10 o'clock or before, or I go before really early. But I'm going against the traffic. The traffic is going into Seattle, and I'm going down. And then when I come back, if I make it before 3 o'clock coming back, I'm in good shape. But if it's after 3, it takes an extra 45 minutes to an hour to get home.
Before the High Bridge, in the 50s, 60s, 70s, was there a lot of cursing of the bridge, and it was always open and backed up, and you never knew?
I think, no, people are easy in West Seattle. I don't know if there was any cursing. I think, you know, well, darn, you know, I'm late because the bridge was, but they knew that if they had to be someplace, they'd adjust their time schedule. I don't know of anybody that cut it short. And today, they cut it short because they think, oh, there's no problem. And if you're going to go on I-5 going north from West Seattle, it's backed up clear almost to the on-ramp from coming off the bridge. I mean, it's total disaster. I mean, that where the on-ramp used to be at Marginal Way, it's backed up that far. If there's, you know, if the and that's just, and everybody's moving. There's problems there because of the Pier 5 and Pier 5 to 7, all the trucks. And the people that are driving the trucks have to be where they have to be because they're paying for all the fuel. The guy that drives the truck pays for the fuel in most cases. That's another sore spot with me, but we'll do that later.
From your point of view, describe the whole movement to secede from Seattle.
The what?
The secession movement, the petitions, because people were angry about the bridge. They had petitions to sign. Do you remember this very clearly?
Yeah, it was, that was about the same time before we had the bridge built.
Yes, it was in the 70s.
Oh yeah.
The idea was to...
Oh yeah, we were going to secede from, yeah, whatever the word is, secede from Seattle. We're going to form our own city. We'd have our own fire department, our own police department. We're going to, and that's when Jeanette Williams got into it. I mean, that's when she took us seriously, and I think the people that had the petition took it seriously too. And then the savior from the ship Heaven came and ran into the span, and that was the answer to they could not rebuild it. And that automatically said, okay, we have to go ahead with Jeanette and the city council at the time, Ted Best. Well, Ted Best wasn't alive then. And
Did you sign the secession petition?
I didn't because I didn't drive it.
Mm-hmm.
I probably didn't. I didn't have the opportunity. If I did, I ignored it.
I heard that some people took it very seriously, but some, it was sort of a half joke to get attention.
Yeah. Well, it could be. I think it's maybe what it started out to be, but you know, you see signs. You got a sign up here that said, "The last person leaving Seattle, turn off the light." I remember that happened. That's when the Boeing first fell in their own hole. I mean, they completely. I don't know what happened, but everybody was leaving Seattle because something happened at the Boeing company, and you know, the same thing is, well, won't go there.
Where are your favorite places to be in West Seattle?
My home. I have a nice home looking over. We don't have a view, but the people across the street do, and we have a working agreement. We've lived there for over 30 years now, and there's no two sunsets alike. The last 4 nights the sunsets have been beautiful. Joanne will bundle up and go over across the street and take pictures of this, you get the whole horizon from the Olympics all the way clear down to past Vashon. And the sun is just, I'll say, Joanne, it's turning red. And I'll look out in my kitchen, the sun's shining in, and last night the whole kitchen looked like it was on fire, bright red. She went over, took pictures. And like I say, the sunsets have never been any different. We have people that walk their dogs in the neighborhood, and one gal said, "Oh, this is so beautiful up there. I live on a dead-end street, kind of, and so that all the traffic goes by 55th, and ours is a dead-end street, 56th, or Hillcrest, and so there's a little bit of traffic, but not very much, and the kids play in the street and everything else. But it's just nice. It's a quiet neighborhood, and so that's my favorite place to be in West Seattle. And I can't think of any, there's nothing, we have favorite restaurants where our grandkids want to have, one wants to eat at the Chinese restaurant, the other one likes the Mexican restaurant, the other one, the Salties. I guess Salties would be a good place for it. That's where we like to celebrate. We celebrate our anniversary and sometimes birthdays down there. And
Of course, you go back to when it was the beach broiler.
Oh, yeah.
And not many people know about that. Describe the beach broiler.
oh wow, I can go back even before that. During the World's Fair, they had a ship that was from Canada, the Canadian Pacific. I don't know what it was. The Canadian Pacific, not Canadian Pacific. It was a fleet that was the Princess Margaret. Anyway, they had a ship that was there during the World's Fair. You'd park down there and you'd walk out and you'd have dinner on the ship. It happens that my brother-in-law's aunt bought that property, and she had the ship. The ship was hers, and it got to the point where it was not stable, and the Coast Guard said they needed to do something different. So she helped build or whatever. They built the beach broiler down there, and that was before the water taxi, and it was just a scenic place to have a nice dinner. It's still a nice place down there. You see people running and walking, and during the 4th of July festival, it's neat. Lou Tice, who went to school with me, or I went to school with him, he's famous, I'm not. He has a building down on Harbor Avenue down there, and we were photographing one of the people in that company. Pacific Institute, yeah. We were photographing a family gathering there, and it was around Christmas time, and the guy said, "Why don't you go up on the roof and get a picture? It's going to be a real nice view." She went up on the roof up there and looked out, and the moon was coming across the water, and I swear you could get out and walk across the water and be in downtown Seattle. The moon, very seldom do you see the moon that far north. It was, and you could see the Space Needle had the Christmas tree on it and everything, and that's a neat place to be. You on a Sunday afternoon, you have to have reservations because they have a brunch, which is really fantastic. I remember going to the Salties when it was the only one they had was at Redondo Beach. Yeah. And the only problem with that is you had to go down the big hill and then come back up the big hill. So in the wintertime, if you were down there, you may as well stay. But then they opened in West Seattle, and then they opened out in Ballard, and they have one, I think, someplace else. But none of them are as nice as the one that's on the waterfront, our waterfront. The one that's in Ballard is okay because you can see the rich people's boats coming and going, and you can.
Salties out there.
You're thinking of Shilshole Bay and
Shilshole Bay, yeah, that's right.
What is that called? I was just there for a party a couple months ago. But I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, that's Salties out there.
No,
it's a different
there's
name.
Elliott Bay.
There's Anthony's.
Anthony's
Homeport. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
That's all right.
I blew it.
Let me ask a question in a different way. You have friends all over the country, all over the world.
Yeah.
They come to Seattle. When you're gonna show them West Seattle, where do you take them?
Okay. Well, first of all, they come to our home and we drive them around the beach. We drive them all around the show. And then if they're gonna be there for a couple of days, we have two different things. If you're overnighter, we take them to the Space Needle immediately and say, this is West Seattle over here, and they see the whole layout of the city of Seattle. And a lot of people are really impressed with that. I'll get a story out of that in just a minute, but if it's an overnight thing, we'll go out to dinner, take them out to Salty's and say this is what the city looks like, and then we'll drive to some of the other places, but we'll always take them around Beach Drive, Harbor Avenue and Alki Avenue and by the lighthouse and then all the way down, and then we live right above the lighthouse, so we cut up the hill and go that way. But that's always, no matter whether it's a day or one night or 2 or 3 days. That's the first place we take them, and then we don't take them down that much through the junction anymore. We travel through the junction, but you know, they're not impressed with businesses because most of them have businesses.
But it's the geography of
the geography, the fact that
coastline.
Yeah, the fact that you're on the water. I mean, you're like I said earlier, you're on an island. You come across the water to get to West Seattle, and all around West Seattle is water. So it's, you know, basically it's an island.
You alluded to the fact that you have a Space Needle story. You said you're talking about the Space Needle, and there's a story there.
Yeah, park in our car.
Oh, yeah, we would take brides and grooms up to the gate. We had a Lincoln Continental, silver Lincoln Continental, and there was a place underneath that says reserved. Never said who it was reserved for. We would put our town car, because it looked like it was a limousine, pull our town car up there and we'd go around the Space Needle and look over when it came to it. Yeah, it's still there. And anytime we went there, we
had our business card in the window.
We had a business card in the window, and we would be able to you know, just park it there. I don't have that car anymore, and I don't park there anymore, so they don't have to worry about it. I don't think that was the story I was going.
But our photographers from all over the world would be so impressed that
Oh,
we
yeah.
had our reserved spot at the Space Needle.
Yeah. Oh, I know what it was. We went up when we had the Pacific Northwest School of Professional Photography. There was a man named Joseph Zelsman who came from New Jersey. Very, very famous photographer. And at the end of the school, we invited everybody to come to our house. We have a swimming pool and, you know, a real nice place. And he went back to East Coast and told all of his friends how he sat around the swimming pool and looked out over the lake and had salmon dinner. And I said to people, that's the biggest lake you will ever see. It runs from Olympia clear up into Canada. But Joe Shelsford, I'm sure he heard the story because he's repeated it to other photographers. We're going to have another photographer from Chicago, which is, you know, my heart is here for him because there were 3 guys that I learned my photography from, Joe Zelsman and Monty Zucker and anyway, those 3 are dear to my heart, and I don't know that they're even alive anymore. Al Gilbert was another one. But anyway, back to